Hey, I'm your host, Melissa, and I want to welcome you to Not Your Average Blonde podcast. I'm here to show you how to elevate your life to become the best version of yourself. I want to take you along your journey to be anything but average and step into your confidence era. Join me each week by subscribing and listening to Not Your Average Blonde podcast, and let's begin our journey to become anything but average. Welcome back to Not Your Average Blonde. I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. I'm sitting here in Arizona and I'm finally starting to be able to just slow down for the holiday season. It's been absolutely nonstop for me for the past month between like work and then projects and travel, which don't get me wrong, I absolutely love travel and will pretty much almost always say yes to traveling. But as I'm sitting here finally having an opportunity to kind of slow down, I'm pretty exhausted. But I finally have some space to do like a bit of reflection as we start to close out, 2024, which I think we all naturally kind of do that, especially as we're getting ready to approach like the new year, kind of reflect on the previous year and go into like the new year with a lot of like hope and optimism and hopefully excitement for, the potential that exists in the upcoming year. 2024, it wasn't a bad year, but it definitely had like its challenges, triumphs, and pretty much just like everything in between. It was a relatively quiet year for me, but I had a lot of growth and transformation that I didn't quite expect and didn't fully realize until a couple weeks ago, which is kind of cool, especially with like all the chaos. It just kind of hit me, kind of like had like a big epiphany a couple weeks ago in the middle of the chaos of just kind of a lot of the lessons that I've learned and like where I'm at and like who I am like as an individual again, which is really cool. So for today's episode, it's going to be a bit longer, but you also have your blonde boosts to give you like the shorter messages that you guys were asking for. But today's message is definitely going to be a lot longer as I'm going to deep dive into the lessons that 2024 taught me. And some of these lessons I'm going to share with you, like these are ones that like changed my perspective and like pushed me out of my comfort zone. And also just like a general reminder of what truly mattered and how much like I am still evolving, which is so cool. I absolutely love that part of life is that like we're constantly growing and changing, or at least we should be. And, that's where you find a lot of like happiness and joy in that. So I hope that like these lessons resonate with you and may even help you with wherever you're at, like on your journey. And we'll give you a few points just to consider. And maybe you'll take a little bit of time as well too and kind of reflect back on like the year and what you learned like this year. So as we start diving in, I want you to grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's reflect on this wild, beautiful, crazy year together. So I jotted down a few lessons that came to mind like for the year. It's actually about like 10 lessons. And there's kind of going to be some like sub lessons like within those as well too. So like I said, this is going to be a bit of a longer episode, but probably the first like biggest lesson that really like hit me this year was the concept of like action versus isolation. The idea is that like you have to take action to get out of isolation. I struggled a lot with my mental health this year, especially in the summertime. It was really hard. It's probably some of the worst like mental health episodes I've had in a very, very, very long time. And I wasn't quite sure exactly like why, but it was, some days I literally just had to take it just like a day at a time. And I think it was a combination of just like extreme isolation and just very low edification in my normal like day-to-day like work. And it was really hard. Logically, thinking on it, like I have an absolutely amazing life, like my needs are met, like I'm very comfortable. I have some really good people in my life. And, I finally have had a chance to be able to kind of like slow down a bit this year and just be very like deliberate in like focusing like on me and like what I want to focus on. So I couldn't quite understand why I was struggling as much as I was, especially with, the isolation piece. That was probably the hardest part for me. And isolation is something that like many of us experience. We definitely go through phases where, you feel like isolated. And the worst is like when you're surrounded by people, but you still feel just like incredibly lonely. But when it comes to isolation, like we don't always know how to get out of it. And one of the big lessons I learned was that action combats like isolation. So like when you're feeling lonely, it's really tempting just to retreat further into like that loneliness and isolation and to sit in your feelings and hope that they'll eventually pass. That was me at times. Like it's a very bad habit that I have, especially like when I'm struggling. Like I tend to want to like self-isolate, but I like recognize that, and it can be really hard to go out, and it's definitely even harder to like reach out to people. But I've learned that like when I'm going through periods like that, it's actually, I need to do the opposite. Like I need to go out. And, the truth is like isolation, it feeds itself. So the longer you stay disconnected, the harder it becomes to break out of that cycle. The key is to take like small intentional actions, such as like send that text that you've been avoiding, invite that friend out just to go get like brunch, or like make a phone call, or send a snap, to a friend, like a conversation like Snap, join that class you've been eyeing, smile at someone at the coffee shop, or just make like small conversation. These might feel like very insignificant moves, but like with those small movements, like it can create so much momentum. And action, no matter how small, it reminds you that like connection is possible and that you're not as alone as your mind might convince you that you are. What's powerful is that action doesn't just create opportunities for connection, it shifts your energy. I had a lot of time off this year and took advantage of it by going to Spain and knocking out part of a dream holiday. It was absolutely amazing. I was still struggling like at the time, and quite a bit of it was done solo, even though I went with like a friend. But like it was so neat just to go and see some of these places that I studied about like in college, just these like gorgeous pieces of like architecture and history, and being able to just like slow down and be like in a different environment and learn about like different like societal values that, this region. I went to Andalusia, that the people held there. I was able to immerse myself into, their culture that showed me a different way of living and a different set of priorities, which I absolutely love. Like I mentioned before, I fucking love to travel. It's so good for like your mind and for your soul, and just changing your perspective, because it exposes you to so many different like ways of life. And it's honestly is one of my favorite things to do. Like I said, it really feeds and edifies my soul. And, having that connection, with other cultures and other people, like I honestly can't recommend it enough. I think everyone, especially if you're younger, take that opportunity, take that time to travel. Like money will come. You'll figure out a way, but like just the values and the lessons that you learn, like when you take that time, to break out of like your own environment and to go see something new, it's, does wonders for you. Like when you engage with the world, even just in the smallest ways, like you really start to feel more capable and more hopeful and more alive. And going back to isolation, you realize that isolation isn't a permanent state. It's a feeling that you can change by stepping outside of it, even if it's just one step at a time. So when you're feeling isolated, I want you to ask yourself, what's one thing I can do today to reach out, engage, or connect? I want you to take that step and watch how it starts to shift your world. Life keeps reiterating like just how powerful like connection can be. And you'll continue to hear, connection like messages like throughout my podcast, because it's a concept that I'm really like, I've been on like a connection journey for several years now, just being more conscientious of ways that connection shows up in my life, whether it's connection with myself, connection with others, connection with my environment, animals, things like I'm around. And I've learned so many lessons from being more deliberate and aware of how connection like manifests itself within my life. And that leads me into, the next like lesson I've learned. Another aspect of connection is that the right people will meet you where you are. It's funny how life just has a way of bringing clarity to what's really meant to be in your corner. One of the biggest lessons I had also reaffirmed later on this year is the right people will meet you where you are. What I mean by this is that like the right people won't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. They won't demand that you dim your light or shrink yourself, nor will they pressure you to be more than what you are capable of in this moment. The right people will see you for all that you are and all that you're becoming, and they'll choose to show up for you anyway. Adding on to like the isolation like period, like I definitely feel that I had to go through like a period of isolation because I was shedding a lot of people like from my life and making room for those people that were better able to show up like in my life for the space and time that I'm at right now. And it's been a really cool lesson that I'm grateful for, and just being able to kind of be awakened to realizing kind of what's happening in my life. And, I've realized again, just especially this year, just how much energy I used to spend trying to fit into spaces that didn't feel right, or trying to prove like my worth to people. I initially realized this when I made my decision to leave like the Mormon church. Definitely another episode, and probably a series of episodes on that. It was like I didn't fit the ideal mold or box, and I tried so hard to, and it was just destroying me like on the inside because it wasn't who I was. And let me tell you, like it was so exhausting, and it was incredibly confusing, and I didn't have trust like in myself. But when the right people come into your life, life becomes a bit more like effortless, because like you don't feel like you're chasing or proving anything. You can be you, and that's enough. So like I've learned that like it's not so much about like the quantity of people that's in your life. It really is about like the quality. And I had that lesson reaffirmed, this year. I had a few, like I said, just dealing with like the isolation. I've had like a few like social experiences where, especially with like work, where I felt like I was just fighting so much to like try to fit in and to try to like make things, like happen. And it just wasn't like, people just were not very like accepting, and people weren't very like open. And it was like, I felt like I was like pushing too hard, or pushing like too much to try to make, some goals happen and to make things like work. But I had to realize that, I was starting to kind of like sacrifice like myself a bit and who I was. And I had a really good mentor that tells me to go where you're celebrated and not where you're tolerated. And I'd realized like I was in an environment where I was just being tolerated. And that's a shitty feeling. Like it's really shitty. Like when you're in an environment that way, and there's so many like ripple effects that like come from that. And, I had to go through like that period of just kind of retreating back, kind of reassess, make like a few changes, and kind of allow like some of those people and like circumstances in my life just to kind of like fade away, and change my mindset and perspective like on this. And, I've learned that, like I said, it's not about the quantity of people in your life. It really is like the quality. And when you surround yourself with good people who truly support you, you're going to feel lighter. Life is going to feel a bit easier. Like more things are going to flow. You're going to be free to evolve without fear about growing like those people around you, because the right ones will grow with you, which is absolutely fucking amazing. And so if there's one thing that I want to remind you of, is like, don't settle for relationships, whether they're friendships, partnerships, work dynamics, that require you to like betray yourself. It's not worth it. Your energy is precious, and who you are is absolutely amazing. And like, save it for the people who see your worth without you having to explain it, and for the people that are going to root for you and that want to see you win just as much as you do. Like there's enough room that like we can all win. We all have different definitions of like what success is, and there's plenty of room for everyone. And those are the type of people, I want to surround myself with. Those people that make me want to become like a better version of myself, because they bring out like that better version when I'm around them, and they encourage you to, pursue your goals, and, support you and give you that love and that connection to be able to make things happen, which is absolutely amazing. And the kicker is, I've learned like the more that you stay true to yourself, the easier it becomes to attract these kinds of people. It's absolutely fucking amazing. When you're authentic, it's like you're a magnet for the right energy. But first you have to trust that you're worthy of being met like where you are, and that you don't need to compromise who you are for love, connection, or belonging. And so if you've spent this year feeling like you're not being met, or if you're felt like unseen or undervalued, I want to tell you this: there are people out there who will see you exactly who you are and choose to be in your life. Trust that these people will find you. The universe will always find a way to bring people in your life that will align with you, and it'll feel easy and it'll feel right, which is really absolutely amazing. So the next lesson is about like your mind. I talk a lot about like just how powerful your mind is, especially with like how you perceive and like approach the world. Now, one thing is like your mind can play tricks on you. My third lesson I wanted to share with you is just how your mental state is not always like an accurate reflection of what's actually happening around you. Now think about that. How many times have you felt overwhelmed, like the world is crumbling, people are out to get you or whatever, only to realize things weren't as bad as they seemed? our minds can magnify like problems, they can distort reality and create narratives that aren't truly aligned with our worth. And this can be a result of childhood wounds, chemical imbalances, hormones. There's, so many different like factors that can go into it. I know for me this year, like I really struggled with just like hormone imbalance and trying to, figure out, some like my nutrition. And, as I'm, growing older, like, your bodies naturally change, and there's different, factors that go into that. So like when you're stressed, anxious, or even just like emotionally drained, it's really easy to interpret everything, through kind of a jaded lens, or which, can make like those small inconveniences feel catastrophic. A neutral comment from someone can feel like a criticism. It's like wearing like foggy glasses that blur your perspective. Now, the key is learning how to recognize that your mind is a filter. It's not always a mirror. When you're in a tough mental state, pause and remind yourself that this is how I'm feeling right now, but it doesn't mean that this is reality. That was something I had to tell myself a lot this year, especially as I was struggling with depression, was just, I had to remind myself, it's like, man, like I'm going to acknowledge that like I'm feeling really shitty right now, but this isn't my reality. The reality is, and I'd have to remind myself of those things of like, I have a good life. I have good people here. I'm grateful for the sun. Like I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to just like slow down and be able to let these feelings like wash over me, or, whatever it may be. You need to ground yourself in what's tangible and what you can see, hear, and touch like in the present moment. And often when you step back and breathe, like you realize that life isn't falling apart. It's just your thoughts that need clarity. Now, don't get me wrong. There have been plenty of times when it all hits really hard. There's, like I said, it can absolutely be like a very vicious cycle, and it can be brutal at times. This year, like I had just compounding effects of, like I said, I was struggling with depression with the complication of just some slight PTSD and like hormone imbalances mixed with a vicious cycle of not getting enough sleep. Like it really compounded everything. And I kind of had to like scrape away at a lot of it and just kind of get down to like my basics of like, okay, like I need to, fix my sleep cycle, because like your mind needs sleep. Well, sleep is so crucial. And you need to take that time to be able to nourish like your mind, through sleep and like nutrition. And like I said, there were times when, I had to logically remind myself that like I have a really great life that I've built and I've come so far. And it was very confusing because I couldn't understand why I was feeling the way that I was. But with a lot of grace and like focus on my overall health, I was able to start working through some of the roots of those imbalances that was impacting my life so much. And that aside, I do want to put a quick plug in there that like if you are struggling with those things, like seek medical help or assistance, like if you need it. There's so many resources that are out there, and a reminder that like you're not alone. So many people are struggling, and more conversation needs to be had about this, and of, different things you can do to work through it. But I think that reminder of like you are never truly alone, and remembering that like emotions are temporary and those mental storms will pass and the light will always come. And when you ground yourself in facts and gratitude, you can recalibrate and see life like more clearly. So that was a pretty big lesson that I learned this year. And going into like the next one, this one I realized more so, I'd say probably within the last like month, was the recognition of evolution. Have you ever felt like life is just pushing you in a direction that you don't quite fully understand? Like things are shifting, they're breaking down, they're falling apart. Like no matter how hard you're trying to like keep things like together, but you just like keep running into walls, or just things just like aren't working out. And it's, it can be really like frustrating because you're like, all right, I'm just going to like double down and like work harder, but it still was not working. Like that was this year for me. I realized this year was like preparing me more for something bigger. And, it wasn't easy, especially when I was going through, some of the struggles I'd previously mentioned, but, adding the compounding effect of like, I didn't have edification in the work I was doing, and I was struggling with where I was at in life in general. I really wanted to move forward and wanted to hit some goals that I, was working really hard towards, especially at the expense of like myself. And it was rough. Looking back, the extreme discomfort that I felt was, a period of growth. And it took me a little bit to realize that like I needed to slow down and kind of step back and like reassess. And then through like that reassessment, kind of understand, okay, like where am I at like right now? Like what's going on? I didn't recognize the signs like initially, but looking back there, were so many signs, because hindsight's always 2020. And some of those signs was, being restless and like stuck. It's like the biggest feeling I had was just this feeling of just being restless and just trapped in like where I was. Like I wanted to move on to the next thing, but I couldn't, like with my job. I don't yet have the luxury of being able to just like pick up and change my environment or to go like where my heart and soul is like calling me. Going along with this, I was also not feeling satisfied with the things that used to make me happy. It felt like something was missing and I was really craving change. I felt the need to change in everything, my living environment, my job, my relationships, like, cause I just felt so stagnant in my life and it was really hard not being able to like make those changes. Another sign was just the challenges and like breakdowns. Like I kept trying to throw myself into like my regular job, which I absolutely love when I get to do it, but I kept running into so many challenges. It felt like the harder I worked and the more I focused on it, there were curveballs, there's people blocking me or things breaking. And I'd go through really intense periods and then I would like burn out and kind of crash and burn from pushing so hard for a while. And life is always going to throw like curveballs. Relationships are going to end, jobs are going to change, struggles will arise, but these can sometimes feel really overwhelming and make you want to feel like you want to give up. I definitely went through a dark period of that, like I said, in the summer, and it was a struggle to just focus on getting through like day by day. And I've heard someone compare the stage similar to like a caterpillar, like breaking free of a cocoon. It's messy, but it's part of that process, like as you're evolving and growing. Another sign, not quite as grim as the last two, is new people and opportunities will appear. Like as you grow, like the universe has a way of putting the right people and opportunities in your life to guide your evolution. I feel like I'm in this phase, this period, like right now, which is so fucking cool. I've recently realized and noticed that like in the past couple of months, life has been ushering in some absolutely incredible people in my life. It has shed a lot of old friendships that I was holding on to, but has brought in some absolutely amazing people who are at a higher level and match my frequency more. It's been amazing just being able to connect with them through, conversations and just having raw discussion about like life, but then also talking about like our hopes and dreams and like, and how we're going to build that, how we're going to build, the futures that like we envision and that we feel inspired by. It's been absolutely amazing to, be around like that inspiration and to feel alive again. Like we believe and like we support each other's dreams and we dare to dream big, which is so cool. Like I absolutely love hearing about like other people's dreams and like what they're doing to like make it happen. And it's been such a powerful experience. And these are the people and encounters that have ranged anywhere from like brief conversations from people that I've met like in the airport or at like a random store to like more permanent people in my life who, I interact with on like a daily or like a weekly basis. It's been so cool and has probably been one of the coolest epiphanies that I've had in a long time. Another one, and like the last like indicator that I'll talk about before moving on to some of the other lessons learned, is the feeling that like you're being pulled towards something bigger. I'm also on the stage right now. And like I said, I finally like feel alive again. And I've always felt like this tug that there's something amazing out there in store for me, like with my life. I really try to do the most, like make the most of it and take advantage of like opportunities that present themselves. And coming out of this like dark period, I feel inspired again and optimistic for my future and what I'm building as well for my future. I'm able to start imagining like a new version of myself and like the future vision of what I want to build, like of the type of life that I want to build for myself and those that like I share my life with. Even though like right now, I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm going to get there, but I fully believe that and know that it's possible just by the fact that that desire and optimism and vision exists within like my heart and soul, which ties me into like the next big lesson that, I've learned this year is the power of detachment. I didn't fully realize like how powerful detachment is until this year. This is letting go of the old, not being mentally or emotionally tied to the outcome like I envision. It's, through letting go of the old, you're releasing what no longer serves you. And that can be, habits, relationships, limiting beliefs. You have to lean into the discomfort and allow it all to wash over you like a wave in the ocean. because change is going to feel messy, but the discomfort is where the magic happens. Growth isn't meant to feel easy. It's meant to challenge you. It's going to stretch you, and ultimately it's going to transform you. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to get confused attachment with not caring or walking away from the things that like you love, but it's about releasing control and the need for outcomes to look a certain way. When you're overly attached, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's to a relationship, like a goal or even identity, we often create unnecessary stress and we block our own growth. And detachment teaches us to trust the process, to trust that like the universe, like opening up that space for the universe to like bring in like what's meant for you. It's realizing that your worth isn't tied to external results or someone else's like opinions. It's allowing space for life to unfold without, forcing or clinging to like a certain outcome. So think about it. When you hold on to something like too tightly, you can't see the bigger picture. When you let go, you create that room for new opportunities to flow in and ideas and possibilities. Detachment, it's not about giving up. It's showing up fully, doing your best, but trusting that whatever is meant for you will stay or find its way to you. And there's so much power in that. True freedom is really in like letting go of the need to control everything and then embracing what comes with an open heart and an open mind. Now, the next lesson is, consistency and how it outweighs like motivation. So this year taught me how fleeting motivation can be. Motivation, it's a feeling. It's, like I said, it's fleeting. It's exciting. It can be energizing, and it can be the initial spark that's what gets you started on something new. But it doesn't always like stick around. How many times have you started a project with a lot of like excitement and vigor, but it just kind of like fizzled out? And next thing you know, it's just kind of like sitting there, like you never like finished it. It's kind of funny because like when you look at it, like some days you wake up feeling just absolutely unstoppable and you're going to, conquer the world and, make this like big project. And then other days it's a struggle. It can be a struggle to get out of bed. It can be a struggle just to put like 5 or 10 minutes into that. But that's where like consistency steps in. Consistency becomes your anchor when motivation disappears. And here's the thing. Consistency, it's quiet. It's kind of that unglamorous kind of power. It's showing up even when you're not in the mood. It's writing one page of your book when you don't feel like writing, or it's going to the gym, even if it's just for a 20-minute walk on days when a full workout like feels impossible. I definitely have days like that. Like I love working out, but there's some days when I'm like, man, like I just don't want to go to the gym. But I'll kind of rationalize with myself. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go. And even if I'm just walking on the treadmill or the Stairmaster for 15 minutes, I'm going to do that. And that's going to be like good enough. And usually more often than not, the fact that like I've started or I did that, I'll be able to, I'll get that motivation to like finish like the full workout. But I've never regretted, taking that time or those moments like for consistency. And so, that's the secret though with like consistency is it's, taking the small steps forward, no matter how significant they may seem in the moment, because consistency is what builds that momentum. Every time you show up for yourself, you're laying another brick in the foundation of your goals and your dreams. Those bricks might not look like much at first, but over time they add up to something incredible, a finished structure, if you will, that you can be proud of. And this year I learned that the people who succeed aren't necessarily the most like talented or the most motivated. They're the ones who are consistent. They're the ones who show up, every day. They're the ones who refuse to give up and who take action, and no matter how they feel. Because, consistency is what turns effort into habit and habit into results. And let's not forget how like consistency like shapes your identity. Every time you follow through, you're reinforcing a belief about yourself. I'm the kind of person who gets things done, for example. And over time, that belief, transforms like how you see yourself and what you believe that you're capable of, which is pretty cool. So if you're waiting for motivation to strike, let me tell you, like, don't take the small step forward today and then do it again tomorrow. Let consistency, not motivation, carry you forward towards your dreams. Now, another lesson is rest is productive. I feel like especially in like American culture, there's so much like negativity around the concept of like rest. It's, I used to believe it that like rest is for the weak or for when I'm dead. This is the mindset that my parents like raised me with. Like I thought if I wasn't hustling, grinding, or pushing myself, every second of the day, like I was wasting time or I was lazy. But here's the lesson that was reemphasized this year is rest isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. Think of rest as like the recharge your body and your mind and your spirit needs to function at their best. Like without it, you're running on empty and eventually you're going to hit a wall. This year, I hit that wall hard. I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, and I realized I had to change the way I thought about rest. I was also getting sick a lot with COVID. If I wasn't giving my body adequate rest, like my body was going to force me to take it one way or another. I'd rather have it be on my terms than on, through like getting sick or something like that. But it's where the magic happens. It's where your creativity gets a chance to flow because your brain has that space to be able to breathe. It's where your body repairs itself. Your stress levels are able to reset and your energy gets replenished. You can't be your best self if you're constantly burning the candle at both ends, and definitely not when you hit, burnout. But the tricky part, especially for me, was resting requires like unlearning. It requires letting go of the guilt that comes with stepping back. It's understanding that taking a day off doesn't mean you're falling behind. It means you're prepared to move forward with more focus and energy. Rest is productive because it allows you to show up better, not just for your goals, but for your relationships, your work, and yourself. And so this year I started to embrace rest in all forms. Thank you to like my Spain trip. Like I absolutely loved, the afternoon siestas, like how they take that time to, rest and then to connect like with each other, especially in the afternoons. It was a really cool like perspective and culture to be a part of for a little bit and to, embrace it. And, sometimes rest, it's meant saying no to plans and then just like sitting in like that stillness or like just being present. There's a few different ways, like I said, that you can rest. Can be as simple as like going for a slow walk or taking a nap or giving yourself a break from the constant pressure, to be on all the time. It's, saying no to, plans to be able to take that time for yourself. It's ultimately a form of self-respect. It's saying and reiterating that like I'm worth taking care of. So if you're feeling burnt out, drained, or stuck, give yourself permission to rest, not out of laziness, but out of a deep understanding that the rest is what allows you to thrive and to be able to give the best of yourself, to the world. Another lesson, we're on number 8 now. So if you got lost with counting 8 of 10, is vulnerability is strength. I used to think vulnerability was a weakness and that if I let people see like the cracks, they'd think less of me. That being strong meant putting on a brave face and pretending I had it all together, even when I didn't. But this year I learned something very different, that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's one of the greatest strengths that you can have. Starting this podcast was a huge leap of faith with vulnerability. I've definitely had minor freak out moments of like, oh my God, what am I doing having this podcast and why am I being vulnerable in here? Why am I sharing like some of my struggles and like some of my lessons just like with the world, especially with, finding out that like a lot of my coworkers like follow this and they listen to this and, there's a lot of vulnerability as I'm talking about like some of these struggles and it can be scary. And it was a huge leap of faith, like trusting in myself and in the universe, with starting this. But with being vulnerable, it means being real and like showing up for you as your authentic self without the masks or the filters. It's saying like, this is me, flaws and all, and like, I'm not ashamed of it. And that takes a lot of courage. It's not easy to let people see the parts of you that feels messy or broken. But when you do, something incredible can happen. Like you create space for connection. So this year I learned that like vulnerability, it's the bridge between people. When you open up and you share your truth and your struggles, your fears, and your dreams, you invite others to do the same. And in that space, shared honesty, real relationships are built. Vulnerability like breaks down walls and it allows people to see you for who you truly are. But vulnerability isn't just about relationships with others. It's also about your relationship with yourself. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you're acknowledging that you're human and it's okay to not have all the answers and that's okay to feel like uncertain or to need help. Vulnerability is what allows you to grow because it pushes you to step outside of your comfort zone. And this year, like I leaned into vulnerability in ways I never thought that I could. Like I let go of the need to always have it together and I allowed myself to ask for help and to admit when I was struggling and to show up as my true self. And it was freeing. It was very freeing, especially, in those times when like my true self wasn't, the best that, I'd been at like other times. It was, accepting kind of those highs and lows because you're not able to be 100% like every single day. It's impossible. So if you're scared of being vulnerable, remember that like it's not a weakness, it's your superpower. It's what makes you relatable, it makes you approachable and human. It's what makes you human at the end of the day. It's what allows you to connect with others on a deep, meaningful level, and it's what opens up the door for like growth, healing, and transformation. And it can be absolutely incredibly amazing, especially when you have those people in life that, like we talked about earlier, that, accept you for like where you are, and that, are just good quality people. And kind of going into like my next lesson, as we're talking about vulnerability, is the next lesson was, understanding that like you don't have to have it all figured out. We live in a world that's constantly encourages us to have everything figured out from like a very young age. Like we're asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And as we age, that question evolves into like, what are your plans? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's next? There's so much pressure to have everything figured out, and that can be incredibly overwhelming, especially when life throws curveballs or things don't go as planned. But one of the most profound lessons I learned this year is that like it's okay to not have it all figured out. In fact, it's more than okay. Like I said, like you're human. And the thing is, like, I used to be very big on that, especially when I was younger, like in my teens, like early 20s, like of having like my entire life like mapped out. I had like a solid, like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year plan of like, this is what I'm going to do, and here's like how I'm going to achieve it. And I was very like tenacious with, pursuing that. But life, it's unpredictable, and it doesn't always follow a neat linear path. And kind of getting my ass handed to me like several times, and just learning and growing and changing my like perspective changed like so much with it. And I'll be honest, I'm not really a fan when people ask me like, oh, like what's your five-year plan? Because I'll be honest, I don't really have like a set in stone, like clear path of like, okay, this is where I want to be in 5 years. Like I have a vision of like how I want to feel and like the type of person I want to be and the life that like I want to build. But getting there, I'm working on a couple of different like areas to be able to like to build that. It's not like one clear cut thing. And I'm trying to be very open to like the opportunities that life is presenting and it's going to continue to present, to be able to help me to like achieve like this vision that like I have for my life. Because like I said, like life, it really is unpredictable. And as much as we want to control every aspect of our future and know exactly what's going to come next, the truth is like we can't predict it. We can't predict it all. We're constantly evolving, we're growing, we're changing, and sometimes the best thing we can do is to let go of the need for uncertainty and to kind of embrace the unknown. And like I said before, trusting that like the universe is going to provide for you. It's going to give you those opportunities that you need, to continue to evolve in your life. So this year I've learned that the pressure to have it all figured out often leads to stress, anxiety, and indecision. Like we think we need to know like what our next move is going to be. And if we don't, we feel lost or inadequate. But what if not knowing or having it all figured out exactly is part of the process? What if the discomfort or of uncertainty is where the growth happens? Not having it all figured out allows space for creativity, flexibility, and exploration. It invites us to experiment with different paths and to try new things and ultimately to like pivot when needed. Like that's how I've learned to approach life, is like, okay, like, I'm going to pursue this thing and, stay open, and I'm just going to start, even if I don't have it all like figured out and I don't have like everything like laid out perfectly in this plan, but like I trust that, all right, I'm going to start, I'm going to take that action and build that momentum and then pivot, throughout my life, like as needed, and go with, like I said, those opportunities that open up. And there's a lot of like freedom that's in that, freedom of like mind and like peace. There's some uncertainty too, but at the end of the day, like there's always going to be uncertainty in life. And the fact is like, you just need to take that action and move and, start building that momentum. So instead of locking ourselves down and either not moving or just moving in like one rigid direction, we get that freedom to be able to learn along the way and to make mistakes and to change our minds. It's, through this journey that we discover what truly excites us and what aligns us with our values and what makes us, come alive. For, one example is like, I used to put immense pressure on myself to have like a very clear, concrete vision of my career, my business, my life. I thought I had to know exactly how everything would unfold, but over the last year, I found that being open to not having a fixed plan has allowed me to be more adaptable and present in the moment. I am learning to take life one step at a time and trusting that each step will guide me closer to, to my true path. And here's the truth, like no one of us are ever really we don't ever really like have everything figured out. If someone tells you they have it all figured out, like they're lying. Like life doesn't have a final destination or a checklist. There's no finish line where you can say like, I figured it all out. Now I'm done. The journey is continuous. You continue to grow and evolve and shift throughout your life. And that's the beauty of life. Like it's so neat. You're not supposed to have all the answers right now. And it's okay to be unsure, to explore and to let life like unfold in ways that are going to absolutely like surprise you. I've learned that like the more you let go of the need to have everything figured out, the more you actually enjoy the ride. You're able to kind of savor like those small moments like in the present, as you're continuing to move forward and progress. Life, it becomes a series of learning moments and discoveries and opportunities that evolve into a person you might have never imagined. And that's so cool. Like it's so neat. And like I said, a lot of it goes back to kind of that detaching and trusting that it's a part of the process. Like if you're feeling lost or unsure, like don't stress. It is a part of the process of life. Just learn how to embrace it. And I trust that not having it all figured out, that's where the magic happens. You're exactly where you need to be. And every step forward is a step towards like clarity, growth, and that version of yourself that like you're meant to become, with some probably really cool opportunities that are going to open up, as you go along your way, because you're open to that. And life is going to give you some cool opportunities if you are open to it. And then if you take those opportunities. Now, like I said, this episode is already pretty long. I think we're like 40 something minutes in, but we are to the final like lesson that I've learned today. And the last piece is how your energy speaks louder than your words. So this year I've come to realize something just incredibly powerful. It's just how your energy speaks louder than your words. You can say all the right things, have the perfect script, and you can rehearse every conversation. But what really communicates to others is the energy that you bring to the situation. This lesson has been profound for me, especially in both personal and professional like relationships. Now I want you to like think about it. Have you ever like met someone who didn't say much, but somehow you could feel their presence? Maybe they walked into the room and you instantly felt drawn to them, or maybe you felt an unspoken sense of calm or confidence from them without even them saying like a word. That's energy at work. On the flip side, have you ever encountered people who said all the right things, but something about that energy just felt off? Maybe their words were kind, but they were an underlying like tension and defensiveness or negativity that you could feel. That's the power of energy influencing how we experience others. Your energy is a reflection of your inner state, and it comes from your thoughts, your emotions and beliefs, and it affects the way that you interact with the world. You can try to mask your true feelings with words, but your energy is always there, and people pick up on that, often subconsciously. For instance, like I found that when I approach a situation with a mindset of openness, positivity, and confidence, I naturally attract the right people and opportunities. It's not about forcing enthusiasm or pretending to be something I'm not. It's about cultivating a mindset that radiates the energy that I want to put out into the world. When I focus on feeling good about myself and trust that I am exactly where I need to be, that energy is magnetic. Like other people pick up on that and they are drawn to it. It shifts the dynamic in conversations and it makes people feel more comfortable around me. And it invites those authentic connections, which are fucking amazing. Like those are the soul ones. Like one of my art friends taught me, this word called like testosterone, and it's like the essence of life, like the goodness of life. There's not really like an English equivalent like for it, but it's through, those shared experiences and having those authentic connections that's where the testosterone is. On the other hand, like when we're talking about energy, if you're feeling like anxious or like uncertain, I've also noticed how that energy, it can block opportunities in relationships. When my energy is out of alignment with my true self, I've noticed it can create tension and confusion with like how I'm perceived. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to your inner state and how it's interacting, how it's like influencing your interactions with others. Sorry, I'm like talking a little bit faster than what my brain I'm like my brain is processing faster than like what I'm talking, because this is a topic I'm very passionate about. I'm very big on energy and aware and sensitive to energy. But when going back to what I was talking about for energy, it's not always about being perfect or like putting on like a smile, because you're not going to want to smile like every single day. And like we've already discussed, like we're not perfect, like we're human. But what it is, it's about being intentional with the energy that you bring to the world. You can always shift your energy by working on your mindset, self-care, and emotional awareness. And when you feel centered and aligned with your values, you're going to notice how your energy shifts the way that people respond to you. I've also learned that the energy we project can change the course of a conversation or relationships, in your life. For example, in challenging conversations, I found that if I approach a situation with a calm and open energy, I'm more likely to hear the other person's perspective and find a common ground. Even if we disagree on it, we can agree to disagree, and I can still have respect like for that other person. On the other hand, if I approach with frustration or like defensiveness, that conversation is going to very rapidly like escalate, and it's going to become harder, if not near impossible, to reach a resolution. Your energy, like I said, people pick up on it, whether consciously or subconsciously. Like people feel that. And there's so much like power in the energy that you have, whether it's like positive or negative. Because at the end of the day, like your energy, it's contagious. Like it sets the tone for how others will engage with you. And the beautiful thing is you can control that. You don't have to wait for external circumstances to change. By managing your energy, you can shift your perspective and how it impacts those around you, and create a life filled with more positivity, connection, and opportunity. So the next time like you find yourself, in a situation, ask yourself, what energy am I bringing to the table? Am I coming from a place of openness, peace, and authenticity? Because that energy will not only impact how you feel, but it will also set the stage for the experiences and the relationships that unfold around you. Now, I think that's about it. Like for today's episode, I can do another podcast alone just talking about energy, but I really hope that these lessons like resonated with you and gave you a fresh perspective on your own journey, and remembering that like you don't have to have it all figured out, and the energy you bring into every moment has the power to shape your life in ways that you might not even realize. As you step into the next chapter of your life and, this next year in 2025, be gentle with yourself and trust that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Keep your energy aligned with who you truly are, and watch how the right people, opportunities, and experiences begin to meet you with where you are. This was such a long episode, but I'm incredibly grateful to have you here and for listening to my message. I hope you have a fantastic holiday season. And if you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave me a review. I'm finally pretty much almost on all like streaming platforms, and those reviews and subscribing really help me out. So until next time, I want you to stay inspired, keep evolving, and never forget to keep living, a bold and authentic and above average life. So talk with you next time. Bye.